I'm going to read out a bit of a report here about an incident that happened earlier this year in Afghanistan. Four Afghan men have been sentenced to death over the mob killing of a woman in Kabul in March. The 28-year-old woman called Farkunda was beaten to death after being accused of burning a copy of the Quran, although witnesses say she did not. It took just 4 days for the verdicts to be reached. 8 men were sentenced to 16 years in prison and 18 others found not guilty. The incident led to widespread protests against the treatment of women. A decision in the case of 19 policemen accused of failing in their duty to prevent the attacks is expected on Sunday. Farkunda's brother told the BBC that the family were not satisfied with the verdict and that all of the main defendants should be put to death. Farkunda had argued with an amulet seller about the practice of peddling charms to women at the well-known Shah de Shamshera shrine, which is within walking distance of the presidential palace and Kabul's main bazaar. The amulet seller is one of those sentenced to death on Wednesday. In the course of the argument, Farkunda was accused of burning the Quran, and the crowd overheard and attacked her. In confession statements read in court, some of the accused admitted they had been drawn in by the claims. An official investigator has said there is no evidence she burned the Quran. And the report goes on to say that in parts of rural Afghanistan, although this was close to Kabul, there's a problem with kangaroo courts and the justice system is widely mistrusted. Afghanistan's obviously a country that still has very serious problems. Anyway, I want to raise this issue because it is all too common in countries that have an Islamic theocracy, if not in name, then in a de facto situation. Um, Basically, you have here a situation where mob mentality takes over. This woman had an argument. It actually says that she herself is a religious scholar, so she's a religious person, um, but she was beaten to death, basically. I've heard of even worse things happening in Pakistan, in Sudan, in other countries that have that are very conservative and very religiously conservative and have a clear Islamic theocracy, if not in name, then in the de facto situation. Now, one thing I always find striking on these reports on cyberspace is there's always some people who come on and say Islam does not permit this, Islam is about peace, Islam is about respect, etc., etc. In other words, these people seem more determined to defend the image of their religion than condemning what has happened. And this infuriates me. I think it is absolutely pathetic. Um, I really think that it is important to be candid about these things and to be blunt. And I do think that there is way too much sensitivity when it comes to debating these issues. I made a few videos about the Charlie Hebdo incident earlier this year, and I've made numerous videos over the years on my channel connected with the issue of political correctness and religion, and specifically Islam. I say specifically Islam because the violence aspect is more common with Islam than other religions when it comes to supposed insult to religion. This is indisputable. It's indisputable. That's not to say that there aren't fanatical Christians and Jews out there. There are. But this is something that is uniquely disproportionate to Islam. Um, and it tends to be in very conservative countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sudan. But it is a very obvious problem. And I'm fed up with people trying to distract from the problem by saying it's got nothing to do with Islam. For God's sake, for God's sake, for Allah's sake, stop lying. Start being honest about this. Um, I don't know if it's their self-preservation because they themselves are disgusted by what they hear about and they don't want the religion to be associated with it. But if that is the case, then dishonesty isn't going to change the problem, and it is basic dishonesty. I also feel very frustrated with so-called liberals in the West who, whenever these issues are raised, they spout out, "Oh, it's Islamophobia." I'm so sick of it. If you're Muslim and you're watching this video, I want to make it clear that this is not about all Muslims, but it is about an obvious reaction whenever these issues are raised, that is automatically about defending the image of Islam instead of recognizing that there is a problem within Islam. And I'm fed up with it. I am fed up with the dishonesty. Um, I believe that truly moderate Muslims, people that is who find comfort in the faith of Islam, who think that there is, um, they think that is the way they want to live their life and so on, and they find comfort in it and they find it's pure and all the rest of it. That's fine. But I believe that it's no good just saying these people have nothing to do with Islam. It's blatantly dishonest because look at that report. We're not talking here about a few individuals. We're talking about a large number of people who were involved and a large number of police officers accused of standing by and doing nothing. This is a cultural problem insofar as we're not talking about a few individuals. And I've often heard it said that this is not a problem with Islam, but it's a problem with the lack of education in these areas. And that might be true, but nevertheless, you cannot pretend that Islam has nothing to do with it. You just can't pretend that is the case because it isn't just, we're not just talking here about uneducated peasants. It also happens in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where there are wealthy princes who have this mentality. Educated wealthy princes who believe that a young man should be flogged because he supposedly offended Islam. Now, I am sick to death of hearing of examples like this, and there is a problem within the religion of Islam that equates offense to religion to violence. In other words, there are many Muslims who will say, yes, the violence is wrong. Yes, these sort of things are terrible, but it's equally terrible that someone offends Islam. And one of the guys that commented on this said, Islam is perfect. Try to be reasonable here. We don't offend other religions. Now, that was the principle that he was looking at, offense to religion, rather than just looking at the barbaric human rights abuse against this woman. So he wasn't condoning what happened, but he seemed to think the main issue was the image of Islam. And that is the problem. That is fundamentally the problem. And I'm sick to death of I was going to say double standards, but I'm sick to death of the dishonesty. And anyone that claims to be a liberal, or anyone who claims to care about human rights and can honestly say there is no connection to Islam is either profoundly naive or profoundly dishonest. That's it. Now, this is not the same as saying all Muslims are evil and Islam's a wicked religion and it's all terrible. That's clearly not true, and it's clearly a reckless thing to say. But I would like to see people start to be honest about this and start to recognize that in far too many Islam majority countries where there is a deeply conservative theocracy, if not in name, then in practice, um, that this is a problem. And yes, I acknowledge that the Afghan authorities have arrested the people. Yes, I acknowledge they're going to get the death sentence. So, it's not that they're sort of letting them away with it. They are, making these arrests. But that is in part because of Western pressure. Because with the intervention came pressure from Western governments to prove that this was going to be a government different from the Taliban. Now, they're making the arrests, that's a good thing, whereas it would have been in the past the Taliban doing it. So it's a good thing in itself that the arrests have been, carried out, but it is still glaringly problematic that there is a mentality in Afghan society that this is perfectly, that there could be, someone could be publicly lynched, and those who are supposed to protect civilians, i.e. the police, stand by and watch. That is disturbing. So my final thoughts on this is, anyone with a brain knows that most of the world's Muslims are normal people, but I think it is blatantly obvious that there is a problem within Islam. And let's stop pretending that anytime anyone questions any aspect of Islam or anytime anyone says something about it, then they're somehow a hateful bigot. Let's just stop it. Let's just stop this cardly, politically correct attitude. Well, I say it's cardly and politically correct. That comes from liberals who should know better and who should really be consistent. Um, And the other attitude is an extreme attitude, which is from too many Muslims, which is basically our religion is above criticism. No, it's not. It's not. If that is your position, you can't call yourself a reasonable person. If you're truly moderate, then you will say, okay, people can debate this. I don't agree with them, but they can debate it. That would be your position.